to know how to prepare for studying in the US, you are in the right place.
Absolutely.
So we'll just wait 2 or 3 more minutes and we'll start right at the top of the hour. Oh, let me make sure I mute this.
Melissa, I have our contact information slide, but maybe I'll put that up at the end
Okay,
for the EdUSA advising part.
very good. We have one joining on Facebook so far. Welcome.
Great.
And we're just waiting for a couple more people. We have 3. Welcome everyone that's joining the session. We're excited to have you here. Hope you have your questions. We have wonderful speakers who can answer hopefully everything you are wondering about.
And if you have an acceptance into a U.S. university and you're transitioning this fall, please let us know where you're going. Type it in the chat box. We'd love to know.
Yes. And that's for anyone either on the Facebook Live or in the Zoom. So we are monitoring both. Feel free to type in on either chat feature so that we can see where you're headed to or where you might be headed to. Some people are still maybe deciding where they want to go. Great. So for those that just joined, again, if you can type in the chat where you're heading to, either on the Zoom or on the Facebook Live. Great. So for those that just joined, oh my goodness.
that echo.
Great. There was a delay on that, so you can hear. And we can just kind of get a sense of where people are headed. Anytime you have a question as well, feel free to type that in. But we will be addressing some of the more frequently asked questions for those that are planning and preparing to go study in the US this fall. I think we'll start with introductions.
Okay.
We're just at the hour. So again, welcome everyone. This is an Education USA session. Preparing for your departure or for your studies in the United States. My name is Melissa Deschamps. I am the Regional Educational Advising Coordinator for the Middle East and North Africa with Education USA, and I'm typically based in Qatar, so work very closely with the team there. I will allow our speakers to introduce themselves as well. But again, just to welcome everyone, thank you for joining, and we do hope this to be more conversational. So feel free to type in your questions. If you're on the Zoom and want to unmute yourself, you're welcome to use the raise hand feature so that we can have you unmute and just ask your question directly. So I will now just turn it over to Paula.
Hi, I'm Paula Mossad, one of the Education USA advisors based at the U.S. Embassy in Qatar. And we're really excited for you to join us today. And congratulations to all of those who do have acceptances into U.S. universities and will be transitioning in the fall. Christine?
Make sure I unmute myself there. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Menand, and I am the Associate Director in the Office of International Education at Carnegie Mellon University, hence my plaid colors behind me here in my Zoom. Those are our colors at Carnegie Mellon, and I work with our incoming exchange students as well as incoming international students. We have a large group coming to Carnegie Mellon and have a campus in Doha, Qatar. So I've been there twice, and I'm really glad to talk to you here as well. Hesham, I'll hand it off to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hesham Algamiel. I'm the FBI Attache, also known as the Legal Attache at the U.S. Embassy in Qatar. I manage all FBI-related cases, anything related to national security and liaison with our Qatari counterparts and partners. So hopefully today we'll discuss about some of the things that you should be aware of to make sure that you are cognizant of interaction with law enforcement in general in the U.S. In case you come across any interaction, what to do, what not to do, to stay safe and to have a point of contact in case you need to reach out.
Get my mute off. Thank you, Hesham and Christine. Christine, let's kick it off by letting students know what papers do they need or documents do they need to bring with them when they are leaving for the U.S.?
It's a very good question. Probably the biggest one that students are asking at this time as they're preparing to that final preparations for coming to the United States. So the first thing I would say is make sure you've got your passport and any other immigration documents. So the reason I mentioned that is if anybody happens to be a U.S. Permanent resident, make sure you've got that card as well as your valid passport. Passport should be valid into the future. It should have your U.S. visa in there as well. Valid U.S. visa for that educational institution. Your I-20 document should be signed. Make sure it's got the correct information on there as well. So if you have that now, make sure it's got everything on there that looks correct. So look that over as well. And then any other information that you'll need for your institution as well, such as, housing, other information, where to go when you first arrive on a campus. Those are useful just to have. You may have them on your phone. I recommend having everything printed out as well in case there's any issues with connections to that regard as well. But immigration documents wise, make sure it's passport, I-20, and having your visa in your passport as well. Any other immigration documents you might have.
And just to clarify for our listeners, the I-20 is the document that the universities generate that proves that the student has acceptance into a U.S. university, and they need to have that.
That's true. And I realize I'm speaking, since I work with that so commonly as well. Some other students could have another document called a DS 2019, and that is more for exchange students that we see that, but some students may have that. By nature of their funding, they could possibly have that document as well. Both of them are, I would say, scholarly student immigration documents for that regard. So one, the I-20 document is what students use to apply for their student visa, which is an F1 visa. That is the type of visa you'll have in your passport. If by chance you're issued a DS 2019 by your incoming university, you'll be applying for a J visa. Both of them typically are for the same thing. It's mainly just might be virtue of the nature of your purpose as an exchange student or a full degree seeking student, and the type of visa you'll be getting.
Okay, thank you. As you're talking, I'm wondering, Hesham, if you have any guidance or advice for students who at port of entry, what to expect when they're arriving at the airport.
So in the U.S., obviously everybody who's going to be arriving is going to have to go through customs and complete their customs process. Remember, in the U.S., they may ask you to open up your phones and allow them access to check your phones because it's considered a container that they need to have access to. You will need to give them access to the phone. If you refuse to give access to the phone and the phone contact, it could delay your entry, and they can seize the phone and hold on to it until such time that access is granted. Aside from that, just follow the instructions and you should have absolutely no problem. Your visa will allow you entry into the country, but just remember that Customs and Border Protections have certain rights at the airport of things that they can do without necessarily search warrant or a legal document that would otherwise be required inside the country.
Thank you for that. That's really important for students to understand when they're arriving and to be aware of. So Christine, once the students arrive in the U.S. and they arrive on campus, where do they need to go? What should they do?
This is another, I received an email today from a student as well who was also under 17, which is something I'll mention too, because that's something to consider too, since we realize students may be arriving in that 17 or 18-year-old range as well. What I would say the main thing to do is once you arrive into the city they're going to is know when you can arrive on campus. Make sure that their welcome day for their dorms. If you're going to be staying on campus, as most students probably are, you're able to move in at that time. If you arrive a day early, which sometimes students do, make sure you have arrangements for that. Perhaps even asking the university if they have an early move-in time. I always recommend asking that in case they do have special time. Especially they may do that for students who are under 17 if you're arriving alone, because it is more difficult to get a hotel room at that time if you're under the age of 18. So making sure that you can get in to move into your campus as well. You'll want to check in with housing, check in and let your academic advisor know you are there as well. And lastly, with your Office of International Education. Now, that is our name for our office. It might be called the Office of Global Services. It could be just the international office, but whatever that is, if you are coming as an international student, you'll be making sure to check in with them as soon as possible. You may have that information where they say, we'll be all meeting the next day, but make sure you have that ready since you will need to check in for immigration purposes as well. And then be looking also to see what activities, make sure you're on the list and in the know of other fun cultural activities, orientation activities right away, so that you're not missing out on anything on the fun side, the cultural side, so that you can immerse yourself into the institution as soon as possible as well. So a good question to have also.
So, and I'm wondering if before the students travel to the US, if they make connections with other students on campus, if they can help them once they arrive, if there's any kind of buddy system or to help greet those international students.
It is, that's a great way to get involved. Many of you will be signed an orientation counselor and a wonderful group of students that will be in your orientation group. And it might be either a group of people within your major, they might do an orientation group by your hall of students as well. But any connection that you can make before you arrive is great to do. Many of you may have been doing that already as you were searching for roommates also, but make those connections too. It's just great to have that one or two other people that you can connect with. Likewise, if you know your RA, which is your resident assistant, normally an upperclassman who will be basically a leader and someone to go to in charge of your hall of residence, that's a great person to possibly connect with as well, to see if they have any insights or recommendations on things to bring, get it acclimated as well too. There are many Facebook groups, social media. I recommend looking to that if you're on social media to see about different connections to make as well. So a good point.
So I'm going to jump over to Hesham here. This is taking a leave. Let's say the student is all settled in the US, has an apartment or in the dorm, and he or she would like to get a driver's license and does the application process. What guidance would you give to international students who are interested in driving in the United States?
So this is going to probably be a different experience than what they're used to. Driving laws and regulations in the US vary somewhat from their experience in Qatar. One thing you'll notice right away in Qatar that there's not too many patrol cars. We're pulling drivers over for traffic violations. In the US, it's different. You will most likely encounter a police vehicle that will be enforcing traffic laws, whether it's speeding, not having a turn signal on, whether or not making a complete stop. So most people driving in the US at some point of time will have an encounter with a police car for traffic violation. Unlike here, people do the traffic or people commit traffic violation, they just get a notice in the mail or on their phone, letting them know that they've committed this violation. In the US, police will pull you over and they will issue the citation on the spot. If that happens, it's very important to make sure that you remain in your vehicle. You may have an urgency to try to get out of the car and walk over to the police officer to discuss the situation with them. Do not do that. The police officer does not know who you are when they pull you over. They don't know that you're an international student. They will automatically assume that you're extremely familiar with the process and the system in the US. So make sure you follow that rule, stay in the vehicle, keep your hands visible as the police officer approach your vehicle. Don't make any sudden movement that the police officer could perceive as threatening movement. And they will tell you exactly what they pulled you over for. They will ask you for your driver license and they will ask you for registration. Every vehicle operating on the road in the US has to have insurance. So they will also probably ask you for your insurance document. Once you identify yourself and give them the documents they're asking for, they may decide to write a citation for the violation or may not, depends on the violation. If you do get a violation, then you will have the right to contest the violation in court. you'll have a date and time where you can show up in court and contest that, or you can just pay the fine via check or credit card and just get it over with. But it's extremely important, if you do get pulled over by the police, that you pull over immediately. If you don't feel safe pulling over at the spot where you're at, maybe turn on your hazardous to let the police officer know that you acknowledge that they're trying to pull you over, and go to a spot that is well lit, that is populated, and you feel safer. And then you can pull over on the spot and then follow the instructions, as I mentioned, to make sure that everybody in the interaction is safe.
Thank you, Hesham. That's really important to be aware of the different rules and regulations around driving in the U.S. Important to be aware, just to, they want you to be safe on the road, and make sure you follow the regulations. Christine, that makes me think, what about when a student settled in, here her has his driver's license, but starting to feel homesick, and is really wondering why they are in the United States studying? What resources are available on campus to help the students get through that feeling of homesickness?
We talk about this a lot on campus because it's one of those, that time of change that many students have had, even just with COVID, making a new transition to a new way has made people, miss what they had before. So students either going to a new country for a full-time degree of study, or students who are studying abroad, we discussed this as well. And I will say first, it's a roller coaster. You're going to have ups and downs. So that is a normal feeling as well. But there are resources to help you get through that, as Paula mentioned, on campus. First one is a great thing to talk about first is your resident assistant. That's one of the reasons you are assigned, you have an RA on your floor, is to talk to you about those issues. They're a great first person to go to. They typically will have another upperclassman who is above them, kind of maybe overseeing. They will also have a staff person they can talk to as well if there's things they realize that they need more resources for. Keeping in touch with friends, those are other things as well. Trying to immerse yourself more in the location as you're in. That's a great way. We talk with students who, when I'm talking to a study abroad student who gets abroad and misses home, a lot of that is because they're holding on to a lot of the back at home rather than getting more immersed and meeting new people. That's another way. Professionally, there are resources on our campus, what we call our counseling and psychological services. So that's something that all universities will have that students can take advantage of if they do want to talk to someone more on a professional level about some homesickness. And likewise, setting up that time to connect with resources back at home if you have this before you go. So setting up a time that you'll be saying, talk to your family, your friends back at home before you go. So you know what, next Sunday, I'm going to go my first week. We're going to just immerse myself. I'm not going to do it on social media. I'm not going to text you. Let's do it next Saturday. Let's set a FaceTime. But for the first week, let's immerse ourselves back at our new campus so we can then be ready to talk to each other. That gives you something to look forward to, knowing that homesickness will end on Saturday or Sunday at 2 p.m. when you have that FaceTime call with your family or friends. But it allows you to get more involved in the time that you are on campus. So hopefully there are some personal professional resources that you can take advantage of to help you get past that feeling. But know that it's very, very common amongst all students. So don't be afraid to talk with others if you are feeling homesick.
I think that's just so true, whether they're international or students who are American, and everybody's dealing with that feeling of homesickness. And what we've heard from international students that we spoke with is that communication, like you mentioned, with their family. Regular communication was very helpful. And the other thing, as you mentioned, is getting involved on campus in activities. Can you give some examples of different clubs or activities that are available to students, at least on your campus at Carnegie Mellon?
I sure can, yes. We have during orientation, there's a lot of opportunities to meet. There's activities to get you integrating with other students who are also possibly first-year students who are joining the campus that year. And then typically once classes begin, that is when the campus comes together as a whole. Our campus has a volunteer fair and a campus activities fair every beginning of every term. So not only in September, but also in January for those students who are hesitant about getting too overwhelmed involved, maybe their first semester. students can join and start new activities even in January as well. Or maybe perhaps activities that they joined that weren't really for them, know that they can find new activities in January. I definitely recommend students to go visit those fairs, not only to learn about perhaps some opportunities to continue maybe intramural sports, activities, games, music activities that they're involved in, theater activities, but also to learn about getting involved in new opportunities. We have at CMU, we have bagpipes. We have a bagpipe group. So many students will come and decide, I'm going to learn the bagpipes. If you've never played them before, you can do that as well. You can start drum. We have a pipe and drum group as well. We have a Quidditch team on campus. So those of you who've never played Quidditch, yes, we have a Quidditch team on campus. Ultimate Frisbee. We have theater groups. We have a wonderful theater program at Carnegie Mellon, but we have another activities group called Scotch and Soda for students who did theater in their high school but want to continue that, or have never done it and now want to do it. Those are great opportunities to take advantage of. And if they don't work for 1 year, know that you've got mostly 4 other years to get involved in new activities and new semesters as well. So definitely visit those. Don't be afraid to sign up for new activities. If it doesn't work out, there's other things that you can take advantage of as well. But it's a great way to meet people with newer interests that you might have too.
I think pushing yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone. I think, to force yourself a little bit to get involved. And like you said, try different things. I mean,
right, exactly. It makes it a really good way too. And what we recommend students to do is when they go to an activities fair is to walk around on their own. We say, as the groups come in together, we will tell them like, okay, now separate, meet your friends in 15 minutes back at this point and come back and share what you found. And that way you're not together influenced by what other people are saying, but you're finding it out and then sharing it with other people after you've met and new people. So that's kind of a nice idea.
I think a lot of the international students are working on building their confidence in speaking English all the time too. And I think that makes it a challenge to reach out sometimes I think they'll find that most Americans are very excited to interact with international students. They want to know where those international students are from and they want to learn about them. So,
right. And I'm glad you mentioned that because that is a great opportunity. Most universities have an international club or various international clubs or student unions that you can join, whether you're from that culture or are interested in that culture or language. So those are great ways to not only share your culture, your interest, but practice English, practice Spanish, practice Arabic, things like that, and share with others as well. Those are some great ways to also even help you get over homesickness sometimes too.
Yeah, for sure. I'm laughing because I'm thinking I took Arabic when I was in college and I joined some clubs and was trying to speak Arabic. And it wasn't very good, but it was a great experience, a great way to meet people.
It really is. It really is.
Hesham, this is making me think, this is kind of for both of you, but I'm thinking one of the biggest issues that get raised or concerns that we have from parents particularly is wondering how their child is going to be safe and secure on a U.S. college campus, and not only on the campus, but within the larger city around the campus. So Hesham, I don't know if you want to touch on this, and then I'll maybe have Christine talk about some of the things that are in place on campus to assure the safety and security of students. But Hesham, what do international students need to be aware of when they're living in a city that's different from where they've come from?
So it's a great question. I think one of the first things to make sure that we explain is the law enforcement system in the US and how it works and how it may be different from the law enforcement system here in Qatar. Obviously, Qatar is a much smaller country. It's one of the safest countries in the world. You take someone that perhaps grew up in this environment and you put them in the US, different environment, crime rates are different. And, there are definitely more crime in the US than there is here. Law enforcement in the US is divided into different jurisdictions. You have everything from the local, which is the city police department. You have the county sheriff. You have more than that, the state level. You have the state troopers or the highway patrol typically. And then you have the federal, like the FBI and Homeland Security and the DEA and so on. Each of these different police departments have a different jurisdictions and they look at different things. So most people's interaction is going to be on the local level. Most colleges and universities in the US also have their own police department, depending on the size of college and university. So they have a police presence on campus that can handle all immediate calls for assistance. So for international students, as I mentioned earlier, most of their interaction with the police or law enforcement in the US is going to probably be something as simple as, a traffic stop for some reason. However, in reality, post 9/11, there's additional focus on a certain level of national security and security level in the US, where it's not going to be uncommon for some of our international students to encounter the FBI. Somebody may reach out to them to ask them some questions. Most of the time, it's going to be very benign. It has something to do with an individual in their circle, whether it's somebody physically associated with them that is of interest to law enforcement, or perhaps somebody in their social media circle that the students are talking to on social media, where they may have never met the person physically or in person. And the FBI or Homeland Security may have some questions on that. If that happens, if somebody reaches out to the students with a question about somebody that they know, just know that if you decide to talk to law enforcement, whether it's the federal or local law enforcement, if you decide to talk to them, make sure that you're truthful and honest in your answers, because if you talk to them and you provide answers that are not truthful, it could severely impact their presence in the US. It could have negative consequences, and it could jeopardize their ability to stay in the US. So talk to them honestly and truthfully. If most of the time, it's going to be something as simple as that, the questions about somebody they're associated with. Remember, in the US, you have certain rights, whether you're a US citizen or a visitor. And some of these rights include that you have the First Amendment protection, meaning that you can say things, speak your mind without having to worry about any repercussions. Obviously, within a limit, you can't incite violence, you can't, call for riots and so on and so forth. But if you have a political opinion, if you have a political point of view, you can express that without having to worry about it. You have a right, if the law enforcement talks to you, you have the right to have an attorney that can be with you to help you answer questions. And you have the right not to answer any questions from law enforcement. And like I said, these rights apply to everybody in the US, regardless of their citizenship status. So keep those in mind. In terms of staying safe, just make sure that you follow just certain basic protocols. If you're going to go out at night, especially in an area that you're not familiar with, should have your contact information. Somebody should know your itinerary, where you're going. If you're going to be going to a particular establishment, let somebody know where you're going and when you expect to be back. It's a good idea to also go out in a group, especially for the first time. If you're not familiar with the area, don't go out by yourself if you can. There's strength in numbers, and make sure that your contact, you have your cell phone handy and so on. If you happen to be a victim of a crime, make sure 911 is the number in the US to call. I know it's different from one country to the other, but in the US, it's 911. Have a sense of surrounding, know where you're at. So if you have to call 911 and report that you're a victim of a crime, or you're a witness even to a crime, know where you're at so you can give them precise location information so they can find you quickly. And most of the time, the response time in the US for police services is 2 to 3 minutes from the time you call 911. So you should be able to get assistance right away.
Thank you, Hesham. It just makes me think about a couple different things. When I was in Qatar, I could leave everything sitting on my car seat, get out of my car, not lock my car, and not worry about the possessions in the car. But I think it's a little bit different in the US.
That's true. Definitely crimes of opportunity are there. And so don't make yourself a victim of a crime of opportunity. Be cautious and follow common sense. If you're going to leave your vehicle locked, make sure your vehicle is locked. Don't leave any of the valuables that are visible within the vehicle. There are different scams that a person can be victim to. And a lot of U.S. citizens that have lived all their life in the U.S. have become victims of these scams as well too. So if you are in doubt, like I said, pick up the phone, call the police, call your local FBI office or other federal law enforcement, and tell them the situation, and they will give you an advice. But make sure, if, like I said, if there's a question in your mind, and if there's any doubt in your mind, don't go through with it, because we all have that, sixth sense that tells us something is not right. If you're just driving down an alleyway or walking down a street that is dark and you don't feel comfortable, don't go through it. Follow a different route, because typically our mind is going to tell us when something is not right, something is not right. And most of the time you're going to know when it's right or not.
Thank you. Christine, to go along all the things that Hesham just shared with us, I would imagine that during orientation time for new students and international students, they do address the issue of safety and security and things students need to be aware of, and what resources are available to them on campus.
Exactly, yes. The safety and security on campuses and in the campus surrounding areas is always a big issue. I think one of the biggest things that I'll follow up with what Hesham said as well was that, knowing your surrounding, talking with others about, what are the rules for that location about going out at night, putting things in your car. I always say we tell students no matter where they're traveling, that's worthwhile to know, because that will change. Even, if you're maybe in my rural town where I grew up of Beaver, Pennsylvania, you probably could leave your car unlocked. Whereas now I live more in the city, I wouldn't leave my car unlocked. So you're going to face that. But I would say, be more cautious always. That is safer, since you are visiting from another area and maybe don't know the resources. But I would say on campus, talk with students, talk with those on campus, find out, can you walk late at night on campus? Is that safe to do so? In most cases, we have escorts that can walk you. You can call an escort number to be walked from, if you're out late at night doing research on one building and need to get back to your dorm, you can have someone come walk you to campus. There are shuttles that we have as well, our own shuttles. We have public transportation that people can take, but we have shuttles also on campus that go to different routes to take students who live off campus as well, or go visiting other areas off campus. Those are great things to take advantage of. We have our own campus police that are very, very helpful. Most universities are going to have campus police, which are associated with local police departments as well, but they're more geared towards the students on that campus. Those are great resources, wonderful colleagues to work with as well. I really enjoy working with our colleagues on campus. They typically will come speak with students at orientation, so it's worthwhile just to know who they are, their names, just so you have a nice contact on campus. But once again, know your surrounding. As Hesham said, that instinct is really going to be something that will kick in when you're traveling. Be more cautious, and then talk to friends and to know kind of the surrounding area, people who live in that area, to know a little bit more also.
If I can just add one thing, obviously, anytime we discuss law enforcement and security and safety, that is not a pleasant conversation. It's always going to come across sounding like there's a threat out there or there's danger, but that's not necessarily always the case. Consider this as one of the worst case scenarios. And if you prepare for the worst case, you're going to be better off. But most of the time, you're going to spend your entire time in the US and not come across any issues of concern. Like I said, maybe just a simple traffic violation, which everybody goes through. It's not a big deal. But other than that, it's not going to be anything. It's not like the FBI is going to be coming and talking and knocking on doors of everyone. That may never happen at all. But if it does happen, just be prepared for it, know what to do. That way you can come out of this experience without being traumatized or being feeling like the world has ended, because it really isn't. And I know it sounds more drastic than it is, but like I said, this is just worst case scenario.
And I thank you for saying that, Hesham, because I'm thinking, students will have a wonderful experience in the United States, and just we want them not to be naive about their choices about where they're going and what they're doing. And I think about my own children in college, my adult children now, and the worst thing that happened to my son was, I don't know, I think we could have bought a new car with the amount that he got in parking tickets for not paying attention to what side of the road the car needs to be parked on. So just being aware it's important for students. So I appreciate that.
That's a great thing to mention, I think, too, is finding out the rules and regulations on campus as far as bicycling, driving. There are going to be rules. For our students who go to the Netherlands, which has biking rules and regulations, they're coming to the US. It's a whole different scenario. So just to be aware of that, what's safe, what's not. Yeah, If you have a car on campus, where to park it, where not to park it.
Yeah.
Very good thing
Snow
to know.
day.
Yeah,
Garbage
snow
removal.
days. And that's another thing I will say, snow days is a big issue. We have areas that they will say no parking on this side of the street
Mhm.
on this day because we've had a huge snowstorm. Typically, I know you would not have that in Doha. So that could be something new that you will come across. And that could be with your bicycle as well. They will also do that if you have a bike on campus, they will periodically clean out bike railings on campuses, especially on campuses, because students, I will say, historically will leave bikes over years. So every once in a while they'll say, I lost a bike this way because I didn't clear it out over the summer once. I have 3 bikes, but so make sure you clear them out when they say they just lock it up to another lock. So be aware of your surroundings.
So
My
let's.
tickets were all street cleaning days myself.
Street cleaning, yes, exactly.
I think my son could never get up at 8 a.m. to move the car to the other side of the road.
Yeah. Trash days are another one. When the big trash trucks coming down, we have small city streets. So sometimes that's the reason, on Thursdays, you can't park in the evening on the street. So the trash truck can come down.
So this makes me think about travel. What about opportunities? Students are all settled now on campus and they're having a positive experience. Now they're thinking about traveling. It's a long weekend, for example, a US holiday. So what do students need to be aware of when they decide to do some traveling within the United States?
This is a really interesting discussion now because students have to have an ID to fly within the United States. They have to show, typically international students are showing their passport as their main form of ID, unless they're able to get what's called a real ID, which is a new, basically a state ID from the state that they're in that counts as an ID that is allowed by the airlines. That is going to, a real ID will actually go into effect in October 2023. It typically used to be a driver's license. So people who were US citizens who did not have a passport could travel with a driver's license. The Pennsylvania driver's license, it doesn't count. A few states don't count. So people have to get a real ID. We're gradually moving that way. Otherwise, as an international student, most are traveling with their passport. So you do need to carry that when you're traveling, even if it is within the United States, because you need to show that to get on and off the airplane, even within the United States. So that's something to be aware of. We have had students have their passport in processing to get renewed, and then they realize they don't have an ID when they want to fly. So that's something just to be aware of to have when you're traveling.
So can the students apply for that ID when they arrive in the country?
Yes, and that's something really good. They normally can't apply for a state ID, a real ID when they arrive. If they're getting a driver's license, if they are going to be doing that, that becomes their real ID as well. But each state will vary. I just know Pennsylvania's, for instance. That's one thing. So to be looking into that, if you're interested in getting a state ID, you can talk more possibly with the international office at your university to find out what the state requirements are for that, because it does vary, unfortunately, by state as far as the ID that students will be needing.
Can students travel with their passports within the United States?
They can, yes. Once they have their passports, they don't need to carry even their I-20 with them. I always tell students, it's not a bad idea. Keep it always together with you just in case, but you won't need your I-20, your immigration document, but then you will need your passport as a form of like a federal ID to travel, to get on and off the airplanes.
Okay. Hesham, do you want to?
Hawaii and Alaska. So those of you who are in the mainland, if you want to go, I just got back from vacation in Hawaii. I highly recommend it. So they're very strict right now due to COVID regulations. That is going to be ending in a month. So if you get a chance to go to Hawaii or Alaska and you're not studying there, I recommend going.
How wonderful. Hesham, do you have anything to add for international students traveling within the United States?
No, it should be very smooth transaction. You don't have to go through customs and border protection every time you travel internally. So as was mentioned, just having a driver license or a state ID will be sufficient to get on the flight and go to your destination.
What about Christine, if an international student wants to travel back home or travel internationally when they're...
Right, that's a good question. The documents they have, typically when they are accepted, they get that I-20 back or that DS 2019 document back from the institution, it will be valid for their entire degree that they are seeking. So students who are going for a US undergraduate degree, 4 years, possibly 5, it'll have that entire duration on there for that degree that you're going into. If it's an associate's degree, it would be for basically 2 years. So you can check that when you receive your I-20 or your DS 2019 document. Your visa, however, might have a different designated time allotted on that. You will need your passport, your visa, your immigration document, I-20 or DS-2019, when you leave, and to re-enter, basically to re-enter the country as well. Because your I-20 document is still valid, you'll have that, but your visa also needs to be valid. And that's where sometimes students might have, their visa might only be good for 3 months, perhaps, or that first year. And let's say they've been in the US for 2 years now, and they're finally leaving the United States. Their visa will have expired by that point. What students will need to do is, wherever they travel to, before they come back to the US, apply for a new US visa. Typically students are doing that in their home countries, but we've had students who have studied abroad while they're at an institution for 4 years. During that semester of studying abroad, they'll apply for their new US visa to come back to the United States with those same immigration documents they used to get their first US visa, their passport, valid passport, their I-20 or DS-2019 document. So you do need to make sure you carry those with you as well.
So that's a lot of information to remember
Yes.
for international. So what I think you would say is, please speak with your International Student Services Office, your DSO, your designated officer, to make sure that you're going to be in compliance with everything when you're traveling, just so there's no misunderstanding or.
And that's even the best thing, because rules and regulations can change as well too. And you'll check in. One of the things you'll do when you arrive, you get a signature on your I-20 when you arrive. It's called a travel signature. And that is something that needs to be updated during your career as an international student. So you'll be getting that signed by your international office. When you're doing so, typically every 6 months or every year, that's a time to check in and make sure that you're in compliance. A good time to check in, because you'll be receiving that while you're there too. Ask if there's any updates too.
So it's really important for international students to know that there is a lot of support for them on US college campuses, and even off campus, there's support if students are in trouble or something happens, that they can reach out to law enforcement who can support them, especially if there's been, as you mentioned, Hesham, if they witnessed a crime or have experienced a crime, that they report, and that they will be supported. So I think that's a great guidance for international students. But as we're wrapping up, I don't see any questions in the chat. I don't know so I don't think we have any other questions right now to ask. I don't know if you'd like to add anything else, Hesham, that you haven't covered regarding the do's and don'ts of interacting with law enforcement.
One quick thing, and this is based on experience. We have seen, especially people coming in from the Gulf region, keep in mind that folks visiting in the US or traveling to the US on student visa are not allowed to purchase and own firearms and guns. So there's a tendency, because depending on where you go, especially in the US, you might find firearms very accessible. But if you're on a student visa, you cannot purchase and own a firearm. That would also preclude you from going to gun ranges to shoot a gun. So keep that in mind. If you happen to be in an area where you desire to get a gun in the US, that you cannot legally do that.
Wow. That's great. And if the student didn't know that was the rules, I can see that easily, especially
Correct.
if they're just invited to go to shoot at a range, that's
Correct.
not something they should be
That
opting to do.
could cause some problems with their, obviously, visa status, and subject them to problems with law enforcement. That is just unnecessary. So keep that in mind.
Thank you, Hesham. Christine, any other guidance for international students? I mean, obviously we want them to have a successful US education experience on campus. I think that it can be life-changing. As a person who studied internationally when I was in college, that one year abroad was life-changing, and just really was wonderful. It broadened my perspectives. And I think when the international students come to the United States, it's such an amazing opportunity for them, not only for the education they receive, but for what they bring to college campuses.
I think that's true. Yes. And there's so much. I think the biggest thing I would recommend to students is make sure to take advantage of all the support that is there on a college campus, not only with the Office of International Education. Check in with them frequently. If everything's going fine, it's not a bad idea. Just check in with housing, dining. Make sure to take advantage of all options, but all the support that is there for you as well. Because it'll really make your time in the U.S. much more worthwhile and immersive. As you said, that time there really helps you get involved.
Yeah, I just think that's critical. Well, I want to thank you both for taking the time to speak with us today. Lots of great information. And I just want to share quickly our contact information for Education USA in Qatar. We're based at the U.S. Embassy. Sorry, I'm just going to share my screen here. Whoop, that's not what I want to share. I'm not very successful in my share here. Sorry, I'm my own technical challenge here. Is it showing up? That's not the slide, is it? I'm giving up. Just 1 minute.
It was showing in the
It did show up. Okay, all right. Yeah. I was just seeing something wonky on my own screen in front of me. Let's see. Oh, I'm gonna make it big. Sorry about that. So any last bits of guidance? I think here we go. Okay, you can see that now.
We can, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you. Sorry about that. My technically challenged for a moment. Here's our information, our contact information. If you're interested in reaching out to us, if you have any questions as you're getting ready to travel to the United States to study, or if you're even starting to research your options for studying in the United States, we are happy to help you. This is our email, doha@educationusa.org. I'm Paula Mossad, and my colleague is Asil Algamiel, and we're both advisors, and we're happy to help and answer any of your questions that you may have about U.S. higher education. So thank you again. I appreciate your time, and yes, best of luck with the start of the new academic year.
Yes, good luck to all of our students.
Yeah, thank you.